Want to answer any question about transactions made by end users? Amazon CloudWatch Application Signals traces 100% of transactions, helping you find and remove user pain points faster and with more flexibility. Know it all and fix it fast.
Hey, welcome everyone to the AWS Cloud Operations Show. My name is Imay Kumar Jagannathan. I am a senior manager. I lead a team of specialist solution architects at AWS, and I'm host for the episode today. And today is a special episode. We did an episode last week, and we are due actually next week, but we're doing it today. And that's because next week we are out as a team. We're doing something. And not only because of that, we also have an amazing guest today on the show. And as you have seen on my LinkedIn post and other social media, we have a special guest. It's Jeff Barr. Without further ado, I just want to open and introduce the guests. Yes, please go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
I thought I was the special guest, Maya. Sorry.
You're the co-host. You're the co-host.
So hi, everybody. My name is Andres Silva. I'm a principal specialist solutions architect. I focus on observability and as part of the cloud operations team. Been at Amazon for 10 years. And happy to be here and chat a little bit with Jeff. Jeff, go ahead.
All right. I am Jeff Barr. My official title is VP and Chief Evangelist for AWS. I'm coming up on 23 years at Amazon. So I've been here since before the beginning of AWS and the cloud, and I've had an absolutely amazing time.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for being here, Jeff. This is such a surreal moment for me. I never thought this would be the case, but this is awesome. Thank you for being on the show to speak to our audience, folks. For those that are watching the show live today, first of all, thank you for being here. Look, this is an opportunity, like you've seen my posts on LinkedIn. Feel free to just ask your questions, anything that you wanted to always talk to Jeff about. Please post it on the chat, on the comment section on LinkedIn, and we'll do our best to get that answered. All right. I have a bunch of questions already prepared, Jeff. So let me go with the first one that I have. You have, like you just mentioned, you've been at Amazon for almost 23 years now. And actually, yesterday was my 7th year at Amazon. I completed 7th year at Amazon yesterday, so which is still 1/3 of your experience, less than 1/3. All right, so you've been traveling a lot in the recent times since the beginning of the year. Tell us about the countries that you visited since January.
Let's see. So far this year, I have been to Japan. I have been to India. I've been to Thailand, and most recently, I was in South America. I was in Peru, and so I've been to lots of really interesting places and gotten to meet with and speak to developers in all those. I love to go there and visit with AWS community events. I generally I'll accept an invitation to a community event, and then I'll work with our local team there to make sure that as part of my trip, I can visit with the local team. Sometimes we'll do a fireside. They'll set up some customer visits. Sometimes we'll do some press interviews. I always like to make the trips really worthwhile. Not just out and back just for a single event, but say, okay, I'm already here. I'm in the country. I've incurred that overhead of traveling. Let me make myself useful while I'm there.
That is awesome. I am sharing my screen now. So I saw this post like 2 months ago, and I grew up in southern India, and the place I grew up is actually like about 100 kilometers from Bangalore, which is called Bangalore now, and I grew up eating dosa all the time, and my wife still makes it's my favorite food. But I couldn't resist myself from asking you this. Please tell me that you did not commit the crime of eating that with the fork and the spoon.
I definitely did not. So you realize when you travel that you're always a guest in somebody else's country and in their culture, and you for sure don't want to stick out. And I remember being in the hotel breakfast that first morning, and I saw a plate with the dosa and with the accompaniments there being carried. I wasn't quite sure what it was. I certainly knew that there's a lot of different amazing breads from India. I wasn't quite sure what that was, but I asked the hostess. I said, I want one of those, whatever that was, and they brought it to me. And then I wasn't quite sure exactly how to eat it, so I think I just jumped on my phone quickly and said, how do I eat this properly? And realizing how to actually like tear and fold and scoop. So wanted to be authentic, and certainly didn't want to be the clumsy outsider for sure.
Right. So yeah, I was saddened that it also broke your tooth. So which is that day. So all right. So yeah, that's my dose of joke. Andres, did you have anything to ask
Okay.
Jeff about that?
Sorry, I was just enjoying the the visual of the whole experience, right? No, but I wanted you talk about a lot of countries that you visited, Jeff. What are the what kind of topics do you mainly talk to our customers when you visit these countries?
So I've been focusing on AWS community events, and the interesting thing that has happened this year is that last year at reInvent, I announced that after 20 years, I was wrapping up my time on the AWS news blog. And then at reInvent, so many people said, well, if you're not going to be blogging anymore, you've got some more openness and flexibility to travel a bit. And I said, I probably do. And so I was invited to, we basically, a lot of folks said, well, we're doing a community event sometime in 2025. Let's find a way to get you there. And so I'm now living up to all of my commitments that I made at reInvent.
Nice. So community events, that's nice. Are there any kind of topics that you've noticed that come up always when you're working on these?
Lately, I have a presentation I call Next Generation Software Development. And the interesting thing is that that area has been evolving so quickly that from the time I first used it in Japan in January, I think I was there, to now, I think I've had to probably change 20% of it for every audience. I don't like to just have a canned presentation and deliver the same one over and over again with the same words. I really like to, first, I want to make sure that I'm up to date with whatever I'm speaking about. But as I'm presenting, I try to you kind of mentally are always like, you've got the presentation, you've got the words on the screen. You try to come up with a good way to convey that to the audience. But to me, it's always like this experiment where you're kind of saying, does this land well with the audience? Are they grasping what it is that I'm speaking about? So I like to kind of fine tune and adjust as I do that. But another thing I always do with my presentations is I try to give a little bit of local flavor to the presentation itself. And this has actually been really fun with generative AI. So I have a set of images within my standard deck, but every time I go to a particular country, I will regenerate the images, but with the name of the country or the name of a city from that country.
Nice.
And that way you get a little bit of local style. And again, I think that you want to really show the audience that you are paying specific attention to them, and that you're not just the kind of like this recording that you go back and you're just like pressing play on the recording place after place. So I've been focusing a lot on effectively my presentation says, well, let's accept that we're now at this really interesting moment in time where for decades we have been building up all these interesting tools and development languages and libraries and so forth. We've been building those things up for decades as an industry. And now if we kind of put those all into one nice big package and we use that to train a language model, we've effectively captured all this experience and expertise in this one model, and we can then use it to help us to be better developers.
Right.
And so I want to make it really clear that these are assistants. These aren't somehow replacing developers. These are giving developers new powers, and that there's certainly new skills they'll probably want to learn in order to be able to be awesome at using these tools. But that these are like, we can look at so many things over the years that were like, oh my gosh, the editor, the compiler, the debugger, the case tool are going to replace the developer. No, they're not. They're going to make those developers better developers and more powerful, more effective developers.
Exactly. I'm so glad you touched on that, because that's that's top of mind for a lot of people. But I think the way you explained it is right on point. I wanted to ask you, Jeff, also, you, like you said before, you joined early on the story of even before AWS, right? And the question is, what convinced you that this was the future when many were skeptical?
Well, let's see. I before I came to Amazon, I had been working as a consultant for a while, and I've been working consulting with very early web services like XML and RSS and XSLT and so forth. And so, in addition to consulting with that and talking to a lot of companies building very early web services tools and applications, I had been running some of my own websites. And one of the things that I found when you run your own website is you can start small, and you've got your own, like at that point you used to like be able to like rent a server by the month, and you'd rent that server by the month that had a fixed amount of compute power and memory and disk and everything, and you'd spend all of your time, at least I did, trying to compress the application to always do better and better from that individual server. And this was before I really understood the idea of scaling up or scaling out. I didn't have any idea what things like load balancers were, and certainly couldn't have afforded to buy like my own hardware load balancer, for example. So I had this good appreciation for the fact that you can start small, you can have a great idea, but then when that great idea starts to take off and you start to actually get real traffic coming in, you get this thing, I think I used to call it a success disaster, where you have this great idea and you say, wouldn't it be amazing if all these people actually showed up and made use of the thing that I built? And then they do, and you're like, now what exactly? Like, well, I can get more servers, and it goes from being a fun personal project and a hobby to something where like, does this want to turn into a business? And it gets complicated and expensive. So having that appreciation of almost success, but realizing that you need this flexibility and the scalability. At the point when I first saw like the first documents around what was ultimately called EC2, really said, wow, this is something that I could have used. And if I could have used it, then others probably could as well.
That's nice. That's nice. That's cool. It's good to know that. Nice.
That personal experience has been so helpful in my job. I think a lot of times when you are part of a marketing department, you kind of hear things from your customers, and you're supposed to understand them and then kind of reflect them back out. But you haven't always lived those challenges.
Right.
So something that is important to me is wherever possible, I want to get actual hands-on experience with the things that I talk about. And like to this day, if someone says, share this article or share this podcast, I will not share anything until I've read it or listened to it and make sure that I feel authentic and okay about sharing something. And if I'm writing about a service or a launch, I have to go and use it hands-on in order to know that it really does what it's claimed.
That makes us feel really good that for the fact that you agreed to be on this podcast or on the show. So,
I think authenticity is something so important in my job, but in life in general, because I think we have a lot of ways that you can kind of fake yourself, and you can have this kind of fake impression on the outside, but you know that it's not actually you. And ultimately, I don't think that's a healthy thing to do. And you sooner or later, if you look like the nice person online, but it turns out you're actually like not that same person in reality, well, you'll get figured out and discovered sooner or later. So better to be the same person all the time.
True, 100%. Okay, so talking about that, I want to go again. I'm doing all the screen sharing all the time, so I promise this is probably the last time. Yeah, I found this. I was doing some background research. Like, I wanted to make sure that I had a better picture of it, because I see Jeff Barr, I've been following since a decade or so, but I still want to like, okay, what else have you said about other things, and if there anything else that I can discover. So yes, I found this blog, and this is so good. I read through the whole thing, and in the end, it's basically what you're saying is, okay, becoming an evangelist. In this section, you're saying that the whole thing is basically just an accident. It was just an accident, and there you are, like you're writing the first blog, and that's like, welcome to the Amazon Web Services blog. That's the first ever blog that you wrote.
Yeah.
So my question is, if you were to do this all over again, if this happens, would you do it?
Oh, 100% for sure. 100%. And even though I joined Amazon at a time when there was a lot of excitement about web services, and there was this like idea that there's a bright future, I was really not thinking this was going to turn into the most impactful part of my career. It was, okay, this is an interesting job, and I'll do this interesting job. And it just step by step grew from the job into like, wow, this is something really unique and really special and a wonderful way to spend over 2 decades.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds great. My follow-up question to that is, when you started technology evangelism, right? So, and to now, which is, again, 22, 23 years ago, what has actually changed and what has remained the same?
Let's see, what has changed? I think that the topics that we talk about have become more mainstream. And there was a time when if you were in software and you were a developer, that most of the world had no idea what that was all about. It was like, oh, something with computers and blinking lights. And most people, it wasn't part of their day-to-day life. So they couldn't quite grasp it. And so sometimes it was almost better not to even tell people what you did, because it was just more confusion than help. But now everybody understands tech, and especially in the Pacific Northwest, there's a great awareness of course, Amazon, but also AWS. Like regular people that you talk to that are not in tech, they know what AWS is all about, and they can refer to it. And it's fascinating to hear people just refer to the cloud in just a lot of different ways. And it's this magical, all powerful, all encompassing thing for all that stuff of mine that's somewhere else that I don't have to actually worry about. So that's something that I think has changed for the better, is just like overall
The awareness.
Right. What hasn't changed in my job? Let's say I'm always in pursuit of not just the authenticity, but the accuracy. I think it's so important if you're a technical communicator that you know what you're talking about, you've got that firsthand experience, and that you try in every possible way to share that in precise detail, exactly the way it is. That you don't round off the rough edges. You don't soften things to make it sound better for like marketing goals. You have to be like super accurate in order to earn trust with your audience.
Yeah. I think like you mentioned before, like authenticity is really key, right?
Mhm.
And like you said, if we're not authentic, then sooner than later, people would find out, like this, when you make hollow claims or kind of glorify things that are actually not true. And
Exactly.
when you do it over a period of time, there's enough such strikes, then you lose trust and people don't really follow you.
That's right. I still remember having this weird fear in the early days that I would write about a service and I would say, here's what it is and here's what it's good for. And people would read the post and they'd start using the service. I just had this strange fear that I would somehow inaccurately describe something, and I had this. Someone would come and say, I listened to what you said and it didn't work, and my startup crashed and burned because what you told me wasn't right. I don't know why this is a weird thing to tell yourself sometimes. And like the first couple of times that I would be out and about and someone would come up and say, hey, are you Jeff? And I had this, oh no, they're the one that crashed. Things to tell yourself sometimes.
They found me.
Yeah,
they should say, yeah, I'm looking for Jeff. You say, I'm looking for Jeff too. Like, let's go find him together.
Exactly. But luckily, I've never had that happen, and it's always thank you for being direct and honest and accurate about what these things are and how they work and what they're good for.
That's cool. One of the things you said is that your approach, when we were talking about the approach, how the topics have changed from the days when you started to now. And I wanted to ask you, how have you changed your approach to technical evangelism as we grown from, a smaller company to, much larger company now?
I think the challenge now is that we have so many services and so many options that you can't be an expert in every service. You can maybe know a little bit about each one. And so I think being able to specialize a bit, and there's so many interesting things that we're doing that you sometimes have to say, well, they're all really interesting, but I had to kind of put some filters on what I want to learn and to explore, because if I just say everything, then it doesn't narrow it down to a point where you can actually make any progress at all.
Yeah. That happens to us too, because as solutions architects, we go talk to a customer, and customer real quick wants to go into a different direction, and you have to say, "Hey, I'm not the expert on that part, but I can talk about this." So
I can
Yeah, the
only
good thing
imagine
is,
the challenge there. Yeah, and then we launched something brand new, and our customers expect us to already have somehow accumulated 5 years of experience with the thing that was launched this morning.
exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
I can relate. Yeah. So you said something before that it was interesting now, how you were in a position where you felt like, oh, I can use this, I can benefit from it, and that made me think, what were the pre AWS skills that proved most valuable in your role as a chief evangelist?
So I'd say having been a hands-on developer for decades was super, super handy. And so I grew up like with, all the early days programming language with BASIC and PL1 and Fortran and lots of assembly languages. And then later doing tons and tons of C and PHP and some Python and Perl. Being able to be very comfortable with a lot of different languages, development methodologies, development tools. My first C book I think I bought in 1980 or 81, like the original KNR C book, and that was of course one of the best investments ever to buy that book, to be very, very good with the Unix command line
Right.
from all the way back to like Unix version 7, which most people was like launched before they were born, but the original Unix command line. And like so those were basic skills, but one of the things I think that stood me really, really well from there was, now we have computers everywhere, and there's no like rationing or shortage of computer time. Like you can get as much as you want whenever you want. When I was like in like grade school and high school and even college, there was like a sign up list, or it was batch processing, or there was some kind of a barrier between your ideas and actually being able to get on the computer. But that was okay. And what it meant for me was that I would do a lot of thinking ahead of time, a lot of planning ahead of time. I'd write out my code. I would simulate my code. I'd try to test it by hand. I would figure out ways to make every shot at that keyboard or at the batch run to be as useful as possible. I learned with every batch system I'd use, turn on every option for error checking and for get the highest detail of error messages and debugging. So if you only get a few seconds every couple hours on the computer,
Right.
it really, really count. So that was really a good skill, but also spending a lot of offline time with documentation and manuals and with code. And then, always having a manual in my backpack. And I'm always reading and rereading the same manual, just in pursuit of like one more detail, to have one more bit of understanding, finding code in trash cans, digging code out of trash cans, reading understand how operating systems work. That like insatiable curiosity for like, I want to understand what's inside and how it works.
Right.
Has been just one of the, I think a unique thing that's made me succeed.
That's awesome.
I think that's awesome. I think that is what you said is really great. Like that kind of curiosity is what is in some ways critical to be a tech evangelist, right? Because you want to have the thirst to learn the next new thing, be comfortable with that, and go learn enough in such a way that you can actually go tell people about it, so they can also learn from you.
Yeah.
And they don't have to spend like 4 hours or 5 hours that you spent to learning that. Maybe shrink that duration.
That's exactly true. But there's another interesting thing that I've noticed is that I'm very comfortable dealing with partial information. There are some situations where I've met people and they say, I can't do anything here until I have full grasp of every last possible detail, and I want to understand it top to bottom, side to side, before they'll even want to like open up and start doing anything. That works in some situations, but sometimes having a little bit of an attitude that says, well, I'll learn enough to be dangerous, as we say, and then I'm just going to figure the rest out as we go, and I'll be very comfortable not knowing everything, but knowing where that boundary is, and then when I'm approaching it, I'll learn more right as I need to. That willingness to proceed on partial information, I think, has turned out to be a really good just personal attribute.
100% agree. So you've written a total of 3,283 blog posts and with 1.6 million words altogether. That's a lot. So my question is, all of us, like including myself, we all have written blog posts. We write and we talk to customers. We explain concepts and technologies. What would be your or tips for us to be effectively communicating complex technology without oversimplifying it? Sometimes we tend to this is nothing. Everything is a crowd operation. I say that I've said that to so many people all the time. Hey, don't worry about anything new that you hear. It's going to be a crowd operation. One of those operations somewhere. So that's all it is. Yeah, that's probably I'm oversimplifying it, and obviously I'm oversimplifying it. But how do we communicate when you explain technology? How do you simplify it, but not really oversimplify it? So the details
it's
don't get lost.
a fine line, and I often think that I'm explaining these things to myself as well. that I'm learning as I go, and that I'm basically documenting a bit of my learning process. So when I would be writing about a new service, I would take the PRFAQ document, and I would create a mind map from that, and I'd organize that all the facts into a nice mind map. And then that would let me zoom out a little bit and get this big picture view of the entire service or the entire launch, and then be able to apply some personal prioritization to what do I think are the most interesting aspects of this launch. As far as not like writing down to your audience, it's hard to know exactly how to do that, other than to think, okay, I've met people from my audience. They're really sharp folks. They understand what's going on. And then something that maybe sounds a little unusual is that when I had times to meet people and say, well, I really enjoyed your writing and it was helpful, and you kind of turned the light bulb on for like a particular service or a feature for me, I would always try to just kind of capture that moment in my head and kind of store it away in this little file that says, these are my customers. And then, literally applying customer obsession and thinking, okay, I remember this one conversation with this particular person in this spot. I can't let them down by not living up to what they expect me to be able to do to teach them.
Got it. And with great insights there. Like I mentioned before, you've written so many blog posts, 3,283, and I'm sure there are some blog posts that kind of like stand out, like for you. Wow, this actually hit. I'm sure there's a lot, but like anything that comes to like top of your mind. Okay, wow, yeah, I remember that. That was cool. Anything like that?
Each and every one of them was really fun to do in its own way. Some of them because it was groundbreaking, but you didn't quite know it at the time. Like the thing with a lot of the significant changes that we've introduced over the years is you kind of have a bit of a hint that it's going to be something good for our customers, but you never quite know for sure until it gets out there. So the initial launches of S3 and EC2 and Lambda and Redshift all stand out. I think EBS in particular, EBS and RDS kind of stick out in my mind because it's hard for some of our audience to remember way back. But when we launched EC2, there was no persistent storage.
Yep.
If your instance crashed, the storage was all attached to it, and the lifetime of the instance was the same as the lifetime of the storage. So EBS was actually a while after EC2. Yeah. And so, but the thing is, we knew that people could get use of that, I forget what we called it. The
instant store?
The instant storage, but there was a name for that, the ephemeral storage, basically.
Ephemeral storage, yeah.
Right. And, the people were actually able to build useful applications without the persistent storage. But when we launched EBS, it's like, okay, wow, this opens up a whole new set of possibilities. I think maybe one that wasn't realized at the time, but let's say CloudWatch and auto scaling and load balancing, those together were the foundation of building horizontally scalable, scale out kinds of systems.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. Like being from coming from the cloud ops team, that actually makes me feel so.
I know, yeah. That's awesome.
Before that, load balancers were usually these expensive things that you had to pay like 6 figures for, and had very specialized expertise to set them up in your data center. and you need two of them, right, because of redundancy.
Yeah, redundancy.
So it was super expensive and super complicated, and it went from that to being something in software that you just create one as you need it, and you just say these are the instances behind it, and these are the metrics that'll tell you what to do. So
Sorry.
super
I was going to click a button, but sorry, I was going to click a button and I clicked the wrong button. So there's a question from the audience. Maybe I posted it on the. I think we want to talk about GenAI a little bit later, but since it came from the audience, I kind of prioritized it. So essentially, the Neeraj Vasudeva wants to know, how do you see the role of cloud evangelism changing with the rise of GenAI, and what advice you have for people to build thought leadership?
Let's see. There's a lot of different ways that I think about this. So certainly it can be helpful for content creation. I certainly would never want to use GenAI to like create a blog post and pass it off as my own, but using it to maybe get you started with some ideas or a bit of an outline is helpful. I think we all know as content creators that the scariest part of the writing process is when you have to write something and you've got a lot of ideas, but all you actually really have in front of you is this blank screen. And somehow you're supposed to turn that into words that are helpful and inspiring to your audience. So I think GenAI can certainly help with that kind of content creation. I think GenAI for development is pretty amazing. And every time I use it even a little bit, it's just kind of mind-blowing to see the power that you suddenly have to go from here's my great idea to here's something that is actually running. And the thing is that I again see it as a good amplification for us as developers. And in my recent presentations, I say that as developers, we always start with kind of an idea. We go to an intent of how we'd like to solve a problem, and then we go to the actual implementation, and then we iterate. So four I's in a row there. But this kind of core of like the intent. This is how I'd like to solve the problem. What we're really doing with GenAI is just putting more magic in between the intent and the implementation. If we were kind of rewind to the beginning of our field, we were writing in binary. So we're kind of hand assembling and putting the ones and zeros. And then we said, okay, let's write an assembler program to translate the mnemonics into binary for us. So the intent moves up from, to like, here's instructions, and we'll let the tool figure out the encoding and the addresses for us, to let's go to a compiler that will write and we express the intent at an even higher level. That the compiler will then decide, okay, these are the assembly instructions to represent the intent. And then we go to GenAI, and our intent just kind of steps up a couple levels again to the point where it's human writable language to specify the intent. So in a way, the process hasn't changed. You start with the intent and you get to the implementation. There's just more assistance in between the intent and the implementation for you.
Right. That's that's so true, right? And I don't know if you had another question in Maya before we move on.
Oh no, go ahead.
Okay, so you said something, and maybe we already talked about this, but Maya asked you about blogs that were like the ones that stood out, right? And you mentioned a lot of good things. Is there a specific service launch that you think has been the most transformative in the industry?
Wow. So this is where we make one team really happy and the other really not. I really have to say it really depends.
Right.
EC2 itself was transformative. S3 was transformative. Lambda and serverless for sure.
Yeah.
But that I don't think that narrows it down.
Right.
I honestly think that so many of the things we've done.
But that's a good problem, right? That we have
Oh, yeah.
many to name.
It really is. And sometimes it's the cumulative effect. It's not one particular thing. It's the fact that we launch something in a new area, but that's just the beginning of the innovation. And then the innovations that basically tells the audience and the customers, it says, we're working in this area. We've listened to you a bunch already, and here's our first step. And then we want to listen to you a whole bunch more and iterate on this and keep building more and more and more in this particular space.
I think that's the key, right? Like it hasn't been one service, but the approach, right, of building on top of those and keeping innovating, right? That has been transformative, right?
Yeah, and one of the interesting things I do hear from our more kind of enterprise level customers often is they weren't attracted to us due to any particular service or any particular feature. But what they really like about the way we do things is that because it is customer obsessed, because we do use customer insight to help us figure out what we need to build and deliver. They basically say, we will count on all of you to listen to the world, listen to the industry, listen to the customers, and build the right things for us. We don't know what those are. We don't know where you're going to go, but we know that you're listening. We know you're doing the right things in response to listening. So it kind of really, really big picture. That is sometimes why we get great customers.
That's true. That's so true.
Right. So, I mean, with all these number of years of doing this tech evangelism, mainly focused on cloud platform, AWS as a whole, has there been a specific theme that you had to keep on sort of reiterating to convey, to overcome or change a misconception about what this is and how this is going to transform technology?
There were a couple in the earlier times. So in the early days, going back 10, 15 plus years, you'd present especially about EC2, and you'd present all the features and all the power it's got. And it'd always be like the one person in the back of the room would say, excuse me, this sounds really amazing, but have you guys thought about security at all? And it's like, well, yes, of course we have, and let me tell you the 100 most important things about that. And because of those early questions, we started doing things like putting together documents that described our security approach. We started modifying our content to make sure that when you present, you kind of lead with security. And then at a certain point, they just said, I assume because you got all these amazing customers and because you're succeeding that you've got security all figured out. And it just actually ceased to be a question well over a decade ago. Yes, they're going to ask about specific features, but the idea in general of is the cloud secure is long since been raised and addressed. So that's one. The other one that was a big deal in the early days was, and we should have addressed this at the very, very beginning. We first launched EC2, and people said, "Oh, this is just excess capacity from your retail business," and you had a bunch of extra servers left over.
I heard that. Yeah, I heard that many times over.
That was never, ever, ever the case. And if we should have, the first time we saw it, we should have said, "I'm sorry, no, that's not how it happened. This is to solve problems for customers." So that was kind of interesting to have to rebut that fake understanding time and time again. And the third one, people say, well, this is just a bunch of just generic servers and racks, right? And that it was sometimes like, oh, anybody could do this, and sooner or later the big guys will come in and they'll do it better than you possibly can. And I guess we're still kind of waiting for that to actually happen. It was funny how they just assumed it was just generic servers when we've always put a lot of effort into the actual hardware engineering at deep levels. And now you look at the things like what we do with the Nitro system and all the amazing custom chips that we design and build, and the Inferentia and the Trainium and the 4 generations of Graviton we've done in less than 6 years. And we're now going from the ground up to build things that are very specifically designed to meet very specific identified needs of customers. So I think we've gone from this idea where originally people would think, well, anybody could do this. It's just a bunch of servers in a rack somewhere, and leftover ones at that. Kind of their you look at the depth that we say, okay, well, we'll go from the silicon on up. It's now at a scale and complexity and level of investment and iteration that individual customers can't do that anymore, right? No individual customer is going to say, let's design their own custom chips and put that as part of a whole custom ensemble of hardware. So there's this really interesting, unique aspect that we can do now that just was not well understood in the past.
Right. I think people thought it was just a byproduct, right? So
yeah. Well, those were fun times, right? Fun times. You're reminiscing about them. That's pretty cool. So
it's been fun to watch that whole shift over the years. And the funny thing I'm seeing now is that some of the vocabulary that was so kind of known to everybody back in those times past has now already gone into history. And I have occasionally had to explain to audiences what a data center is, which is fascinating.
that is pretty cool.
That's now kind of this past generational term. And last year I was at an audience in Argentina. I was at this great audience of college students, and I'm giving my talk and I'm explaining a bit of history, and I mentioned the word mainframe, and I suddenly saw like actual question marks. Everybody's head, like, what is mainframe? We've never heard that word before. And I quickly realized that, oh wow, this is interesting. This is an actual generation gap moment of my history versus theirs. And I paused for a bit and I explained in a minute or two, this is let me give you ancient history and tell you what a mainframe actually is. And that was really like a really fun moment that just says how fast our industry moves and how quickly times have changed. And this was not an educational gap with the students. It wasn't a language issue. It's like, wow, this is like actually ancient history by their point of view, right? This is something that happened like when their parents were young, basically. So what should they need to know about?
Yeah, full transparency. I graduated in 2002. Till date, I've never seen a mainframe screen in my life so far. So
I
remember when both of my sons, when they were studying math and computer science and showing me these like pictures in a textbook of like all these like old black and white pictures of computers, like, Dad, look at this old stuff. It's like, yeah, that was stuff I actually used.
I'm not going to do any full transparency. I'm not going to reveal my secrets. But anyway, that reminded me of something funny I saw the other day, that this dad showed a floppy disk to his kid, and it says, "Oh, do you know what this is? Oh, Dad, cool. You 3D printed the save button."
Yeah,
that's the kind of cool. I wanted to ask you, Jeff, about the most challenging period during your time at AWS, and how did you navigate it?
Oh, let's see. Most challenging period. Let's see. I think the most challenging period, there was one reinvent before we had a blogging team that I think I wrote 35 or 37 blog posts in the 2 months before reinvent.
Wow.
Something crazy. But the thing is, that was kind of like both a strength and a weakness, and that I didn't really know that there was a way to go to management and say we need to scale out and add more folks to the team. So it was just, this is the amount of work to do. I just have to do all this work, and so that was pretty intense, but I did it, and that was many years in the past, and since then we of course have hired an entire team, and there's a blog operations manager. Yep. Things are much more fun and smoother now. And the most amazing thing is, after all those posts, we're sitting in we called it the launch war room, as we're sitting there listening to all the launches come off of the keynote, and there was some new instance type announced that they didn't tell us about. And we had this absolute rule on the team that every instance type gets a blog post. And we were just ironclad about, there has to be a blog post for this. And then we can't let our audience down, because people start searching for the content right away. And so the product manager for that launch happened to be in the room. They briefed me in a matter of minutes, and I put this cone of silence around me and wrote the entire blog post in half an hour. He reviewed it right away, and we had that blog post up from scratch. I wrote the whole thing just in this crazy environment, just to keep up that commitment we had to our audience to always make sure we had content online and ready for them.
That is amazing. Well, I must confess, half an hour. I had to do that in 24 hours for Q investigations in December, but half an hour is insane.
There was some cutting and pasting, but still, you want to get it all right, and just kind of set yourself this personal challenge of how focused can I possibly be for the next 30 minutes and make it happen.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. So,
can you address this question from Eduardo? I like that question.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Eduardo, thank you so much for the question. So how was the experience when you had to speak at an event with a lot of people for the first time?
Oh, nice.
Let's see. So I've been doing speaking for quite a while, and it's something you get more comfortable with over time. And the interesting thing I found with tech audiences is that the audiences are basically a bunch of developers that are thinking, I could be up there on stage instead of the presenter, and they all want you to succeed. There are kinds of audiences and places where the audience is all these very critical people, and their best hope is that you stumble and fail as you're presenting. The audience is thinking, man, this poor guy's been forced up on stage, and I sure hope that his slides work and his demos work and that nothing goes wrong for them. And you can almost feel that positive energy of the audience thinking, well, better you than me, but I sure hope that it's going to go really, really well for you. And over time, you learn to deal with, okay, the projector didn't work, or your laptop suddenly burns up in the middle of the presentation, or there's a heckler in the audience or whatever, and you just kind of say, well, this is just part of the job, and you find like good ways to deal with it.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, Eduardo also said this. Eduardo, thank you, but I refuse to take all the credit to myself. I'm just so lucky to have so many solution architects on the team and in the technical field community to actually make that happen. Without them, this wouldn't be the case. But thank you so much for that.
It turns out that our work really matters. We do things, and it's part of our job. But the number of times that I've heard back, and I'm sure that you both have as well, that something that we did has been some kind of a help someone that read it to actually make a nice step forward and step up in their career and their life. And it's super meaningful when you hear that. They say, I read something that you wrote, or you suggested something and I pursued that. And of course they actually did all the work and put all the energy in and say, hey, that really helped me. And I got a new job, I got a promotion, I totally changed my whole career around. It's like, wow, that's really cool. It's amazing to be able to get that feedback from someone, and to know that what we do matters and that people take us seriously.
Yeah, that's actually true. When I hear that, Jeff well said on that, like I actually share that with my family, my wife and my kids, and they don't really think I'm doing so much of a good job. But when I say that, like, you guys don't respect me, but look at others. People actually do value my work. That's good. Okay, so what's the most memorable interaction you've had with Jeff Bezos? You didn't see that?
Oh, let's see. Okay, so there was this really fun time, the early history of AWS, and let's see. What would I think the most memorable? So I got to be Jeff's technical assistant for a weekend. We got to go to some weekend event, and so I got to actually travel with him. And the cool thing about Jeff is we were talking about a bunch of different startups as we were flying, I think, to San Francisco, and a particular startup came up, and that they just kind of like the startup had like recently failed, and we said, why did they fail? And he has this very insightful view, and he said, well, if you look at that company, this is what they thought their business was, and this is what they were doing. But if you step back a tiny bit, it was a whole different thing. And it was funny to see his macro perspective on somebody else's entire business and business model and customers and product. He kind of grasped it in a way that the company itself didn't. Was fascinating to see that level of understanding they had. And this was just some random company whose name we just kind of happened to bring up in our conversation.
That's very insightful.
That was certainly memorable. But the cool thing is I got to actually travel with him a couple times. And later that year, we were at the Amazon holiday party, and my wife and I were standing in line waiting for something. And then Jeff came up to say hi to me, which was pretty cool to have that happen. And that got me a lot of good credibility at home. So.
That's nice. Love it.
Yeah, you both share half the name, so that's another thing.
Exactly. Yeah, it never hurts to actually have that ambiguity in place. I was in some situation once, and the product manager was talking to the team, and I'd asked for some feature, and they told the team said, well, Jeff really needs this, and it was me, but it was they thought it was the other Jeff. So I'm not going to correct them.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so how has being, I mean, you've been the face of AWS technology for so many of us, and how has that shaped you personally? And has it also changed how you view technology's role in the society?
Let's see. So personally, I think something I've learned is it's important to be the same person all the time. When you're in a public facing role, you're effectively always on duty, and you never know when someone that knows you online might meet you in person. And so you have to have this kind of like personal integrity where you're always the same person, and you're not like the nice person online, and then you're like the impatient, grouchy person offline. Someone will, especially in today's social media era, someone will capture you being inauthentic and call you out on it right away. And so being like that same person all the time, I think, is super, super important. Always taking people seriously, regardless of their age or their background, I think is so important. I was lucky enough when I was just getting into the field as a teenager to be able to go to like a computer club here in Seattle. I was 15 years old, maybe. No one cared about my age. No one questioned my right to be in a place mostly populated by adults, a generation older than me. They were open and receptive and welcomed me as part of their community. And I try to, whenever I'm visiting with communities, I try to kind of tell a little bit of that story sometimes and make it really clear that the communities have to be open and welcoming and receptive to new folks as they show up. You know, if you want to have a thriving community, you need a way for new people to be able to attend and feel like they could be a part of it. And maybe they're just going to show up and very quietly listen and learn for a bit. And that's totally fine.
That's nice. You know that when you said about personal integrity or being the same person, it's always the same next person. I remember years ago I was at reInvent and I saw Jeff coming, and I don't think I had ever met Jeff at that point. And I said, "Hey, Jeff," and he said, "Hey, hi." I mean, I was surprised. It's like if he knew me, it was like,
well,
so I can attest to that.
This is the biggest challenge of being well known is you reach the limits of your personal memory scalability, and you know so many people by name or face or email alias or social media alias somewhere, and you've maybe talked to them before, maybe you haven't, maybe you've even worked on a project together. You suddenly at some point, like, your buffer overflows and you can't quite keep all that straight anymore. And it's wonderful that everybody expects that I can remember everybody, but I'm too old and I just can't remember all those people anymore.
Don't worry. I mean, I'm not famous or anything, and I still don't remember a lot of people. And Maya knows this from experience. Right? So,
he forgets me too sometimes.
I was at a reInvent event and introduced myself to someone I'd been like working with for 10 years as if we hadn't met each other. It's like, man, this is really, really embarrassing. But like some kind of like a little device that could just like whisper in my ear right as I'm stepping up to somebody, hey, you already know this person or not, would be like,
this is so and so, right? Yeah, that would be great.
Right. And you know, it's always amazing to get to meet people, you know, at our social events and at reInvent and places like that. It's always so great to be able to meet folks, and I always do my best to stop and say hello and chat.
That's awesome. So I wanted to ask you, Jeff, what are you really excited about when you start your day? What excites you? Like, oh yeah, I'm ready for this today.
Let's see. There's always something new to explore, and I have to balance off always being fascinated by the bright and shiny thing versus I need to put some actual like quality time into one particular thing. Like I had some fun last week with the Q developer command line, and I actually this week I was going to put some more time into that, and I've been a little bit distracted with a couple other things this week, getting ready for my next set of trips, but. I love the command line so far. Has been like really, really fun to experiment with and just see how quickly you go from the intent to the implementation. And it takes care of so much of the details. Like programming is in a sense both easier and more difficult than decades ago. Like it used to be like the simple hello world. You'd write from the command line, you'd a couple lines, you know, in your simple editor, and you compile, you run it. There wasn't a whole lot of stuff underneath or around you needed to worry about. But now if you want to do like a web application and with some front end and some back end. There's so many choices and so many moving parts. I see that the AI tools are great at actually helping you to get not just like help you to make some good choices, but take care of a lot of the nitty gritty of downloading and configuring and just getting all that stuff there, so that that part in the middle that you really want to do is what you can actually focus on.
Right. That reminded me when the new QCLI came out. I think it was towards the weekend. The productivity went down after that. I was just the weekend was entirely dedicated to just playing with it. So I can agree with that.
I do think some of these tools are really changing what we think of when we think of an application. I think we used to think of it as this very carefully designed thing that we put a lot of investment in for years and years and years, and carefully curate it and make sure that we could maintain it for a long, long time to come. I think that apps are going to become somewhat more kind of discardable and transient. We'll focus a lot on data and data integrity and good schemas and protecting the data, keeping that data evolving for a long time. But then I think that it's going to get so easy to build apps that we won't kind of think about the long-term implementation of these apps anymore. We'll just build fresh ones every time we need them.
That's so insightful. That's so true.
Yeah, I agree with that. So with this long, successful career you've had, did you have a mentor? And also, can you advise on like how young tech professionals should treat mentorship?
I've certainly had some really good managers over the years that were, both kind of technical mentors and personal mentors that you could look back and say that those lessons I learned at a really early age in my career were super, super helpful. Stepping into the evangelist role, I really didn't have anybody to look up to or to learn from. And it was all like, kind of do what seems to make sense. It was like, okay. And the model ultimately for me was understand things deeply and explain them. It was all I could kind of figure out as like the really simple job description, understand and explain. But I do think we're in a great time now with so much content online that when someone wants to learn, it's not figure out how to get accepted into a school and spend 4 years in a formal program. We've got so much great content online that with a little bit of idea of what you want to learn, and then that personal focus and actual dedication to say, I'm going to stick with this particular thing and learn it and use it. I think we're in a much better learning environment than in decades past.
That's awesome.
So you can also bounce off your ideas with an AI system.
There you go.
It's you don't have to search for a human to spend time with you.
I'm already finding that sometimes it's easier to build apps from scratch than to go find the one you built last week from scratch to solve the same problem.
Yeah,
that's true. That is so true. I want to ask this question for my daughter Andrea, because she's venturing into developer world. What advice would you give young developers now in the world of AI?
I would say, first, welcome to a really exciting time in our field. I think it's super important. Spend some time learning every week. Like even when you think you've got that basic set of skills, find some part of every week that is your learning time to try something new, and either directed or non-directed, but just make sure that you don't ever get stuck on some particular type or generation of technology.
That's awesome. That's great advice.
Yeah, there's always new things to explore, right? Yeah. Do you have any specific advice for people who are going to do tech evangelism, like specifically thinking about, hey, I'm very comfortable to be in the public, whether in person to speak, or maybe I'm really comfortable writing stuff. Do you have any specific advice for people who want to start it there?
Sure. I think there's more opportunities now to speak than ever before. I think a lot of the events are really trying hard to attract new speakers that aren't like the same usual faces like me. So there's great opportunities to get out and speak. I think oftentimes you need to build up a little bit of a social media presence first, like kind of, sit down at your computer, record a video, create some content, show the world who you are, be a little bit bold about finding places that are looking for speakers and say, I've never done this before, but I'm ready to give it a shot. And it'll almost always work out well. There's just a hunger for fresh speakers out there, and no shortage of places to speak.
That's awesome. That was really good, very insightful, and also just have the thirst of like wanting to learn new stuff and be very comfortable with playing with something that is not fully ready yet, and also at the same time, like making use of existing knowledge that you gained over a period of time to kind of like think through how something would be put to use, right? So that is something that is important as well.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. So this is good. This has been a great conversation. Like Neeraj said, yeah, this is just an awesome session, even for us as hosts to interview you, Jeff. Thank you, audience, for joining. And it's been great. So there's another live stream that is starting on the same channel. So I'm gonna let them start on time, hopefully. Thank you all. We'll see you. Actually, like I said before, we are skipping next week because of our scheduling, and we'll have another one in the next one. You watch out on LinkedIn or other social media. Thank you so much. You all have a great rest of the day and weekend ahead.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks for all the great comments.